Welcome back. This lesson is so important for me to teach and you to understand. And even at my age, my brain continues to develop, but never like when you're young, up to 25. But I want to start with some important facts for you to know about the brain. 1 in 4 adults have brain struggles in any given year. It's about the same number in children. 75% of all mental health issues begin before the age of 25. 80% of children who struggle with a mental health, or we call them brain issues, are unidentified and get no help. That's sad. 50% of students with a mental health issue drop out of school. 65 to 75% of teenagers who go to jail have a mental health issue or they have had a brain injury. So this is why it is so important to know about brain development. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among teenagers, behind accidents and homicide, but it is more than cancer, heart disease, diabetes combined. 86% of teenagers know someone who has a mental health issues. That's why we keep saying they are everywhere. Over 86% of teens in a survey say that mental health is an important topic to be discussed in school, and it's often not. And over 84% say that there is stigma surrounding mental health. And you're going to learn in this course that what Dr. Payne and I believe is that mental health is really brain health. And the more you work on optimizing the physical functioning of your brain, your mood will be better. One simple tip, there is a linear correlation. You're like, well, what does that mean? A direct correlation between the number of fruits and vegetables you eat, up to 8, and your level of happiness. So what does that mean? The more fruits and vegetables you eat a day, the happier you're going to be, and the effect happens within 24 hours. So brain development is just so interesting. When you're born, the brain is actually very low in activity, but then it ramps up very quickly as you make new neurons, as those neurons sprout new connections. There's just a lot of very exciting activity, and it increases up until about the age of 8. And then from 8 to 25, it starts to decrease. But the decrease is a very important process because what's happening is it's shaping your brain for the long term in your life. And there are 2 processes, one called pruning, where your brain will actually prune synapses or connections that it's not using, and myelination, which is nerve cells are becoming wrapped with a white fatty substance called myelin that helps your brains become much more efficient. Now, I know that might sound hard. It's not. It's really very simple. So pruning, we're born with an overabundance of brain cells and connections in the brain, and you prune, so you're programmed to prune unnecessary ones and ones that got together incorrectly. And there's a process in the brain we call use it or lose it. So the ones you're using, the brain will strengthen what's used, and it eliminates connections that are not being used. So if you never play sports as a young one, then those nerve tracts will become pruned, and it'll be harder to learn later on. If you don't learn a musical instrument when you're young, those nerve tracts will get pruned, and not impossible, but harder to learn later. If you don't learn a couple of languages when you're young, they're going to be harder to learn later on. So experience, opportunity, the stress you're under, your diet influences pruning. And, is it enough? Because you want it to be enough. You don't want to have extra tracts because if you're not using them, it'll take up too much energy. So it's a very important process, but you also don't want pruning to go crazy because then it can disrupt your ability to learn. Myelination is where individual nerve cells, and remember what we said, you have 100 billion of them, over time they get wrapped with a white fatty substance called myelin that wraps and insulates these neurons. So sort of if you think about insulation on copper wires, when a nerve cell becomes wrapped with myelin, they actually can work a lot more efficiently. Nerve cells will actually fire. They'll go 10 to 100 times faster. So they'll conduct impulses and energy at a much faster pace. So myelination begins at birth, but it continues into adulthood, and it starts at the back of your brain. So when you're born, your cerebellum and occipital lobes, so vision, become myelinated first. And then very slowly over the first 25 years of your life, starting from back to front, nerve cells become myelinated, and your prefrontal cortex, that most human, thoughtful part of you, is not fully myelinated until you're about 25 in females and about 28 in males. You do not want to disrupt this process. This is an incredibly important process, and things like drug abuse, alcohol, smoking, stress, emotional trauma, physical trauma, a bad diet, they disrupt or delay development. Now, if you've not been very good to your brain, have hope, but now would be a good time to start, because this is such a critical process that will actually set you up for success or failure for the rest of your life. Fact number 3, the teenage brain is all about drama. Your emotional brain, your limbic system, which we'll talk about, but think of it as your emotional brain is in full swing. It's working hard. So emotions and bonding, that's part of your limbic system, are very important. Depression and anxiety are common in teens. In one study, nearly 50% of teens had contemplated suicide. So if you've thought about it, it's sort of normal. Almost half the kids have thought about it. Now, if you've tried it, that's not normal. Or if you have plans to try it, you want to go tell somebody, because odds are you have an issue that can be helped. 83% of teens, their best memories involve their friends, because their limbic brain, their emotional brain, is so active. But because your prefrontal cortex is not fully on board, sometimes your emotions can overpower your logic. And that's normal. It's a developmental stage. Fact number 4, peer pressure just doesn't come from your peers. There's another area deep in your brain. It's called the basal ganglia and amygdala. They're more active than your prefrontal cortex. So you can be really anxious about what other people think of you. And over the years, as a child psychiatrist and adult psychiatrist, I developed a rule called the 13-40-60 rule, which says when you're 13, you worry about what everybody's thinking of you. When you're 40, you don't care what anybody thinks about you. And when you're 60, like me, you realize no one's been thinking about you at all. People spend their days worrying and thinking about themselves, not you. Because the limbic system is really active, people crave friendships, they crave bonding, they crave peer acceptance, that's very important to them. When your prefrontal cortex develops, you'll become much more thoughtful about this. And you'll see on the slide where we say current drug programs are not effective. And in large part, it's because the need to fit in, if you hang out with a group of kids that do drugs, you are much more likely to do drugs because that need to fit in can overpower your thoughtful brain. Now, what I'm trying to do, and what Dr. Payne and our panel are trying to do, is get you literally to fall in love with your brain so that no matter what your friends are doing, that you are going to do everything you can to protect it because your brain runs every part of your life. Brain fact 5, your prefrontal cortex, as I've said, is the last part of the brain to fully develop, about 25 in females, 28 in males. We're going to talk a lot more about your prefrontal cortex, but just think of it. It's involved in planning, judgment, forethought, impulse control, organization, time management, procrastination, goal setting, learning from the mistakes you make, which is really what, when people say, oh, he's mature or she's acting in a mature way, what it means is you're not making the same mistakes over and over again. And this is why you have parents that I always, tell parents, you are their prefrontal cortex until theirs develops. It's just such a critical point. Jerry Seinfeld once said, the brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, violent thoughts that no one should ever hear. And they tend to get out more if your prefrontal cortex is not developed. So when you're in class and you're like, I cannot believe that kid just said that, it's because his prefrontal cortex didn't develop or hasn't fully developed, and life will be much different, after 25 if you've not hurt that part of the brain. Fact number 6, multitasking, doing like 6 things at once, is not good for your brain. You are not more productive. It leads to more distractions. It's inefficient, decreases performance. Gray matter, with the level of stress multitasking puts on your brain, gray matter is brain cells. They're actually a collection of cell bodies where a lot of the work is happening. So when I say gray matter shrinks, it means the cells in your brain are either dying or shrinking if you do too much in the way of multitasking. Now, listening to music while working can be a good thing, especially if you listen to classical music. Now, I know a lot of teenagers go, oh, I would never. But you want to at least listen to it and see if there's something you like, because actually a lot of rock music actually was based on classical music. And there is a Mozart tune, or Mozart piece called K448. So, you can Google it and listen to it. It has been shown to increase things like energy and focus, creativity. Mozart and Strauss, Johann Strauss, have been shown listening to them for 25 minutes a day to lower stress and lower your blood pressure. Even the group ABBA has been shown to lower stress. So find music you love, but be careful. Multitasking is just getting crazy now. You're driving and texting, which is dangerous, or playing video games while you're on the phone, while you're trying to do homework. If you do one thing at a time, you are much more effective. You want to be careful with social media obsessions. Those who obsess with social media have a smaller area of the brain that processes emotions and restraint. So it's not helping your brain develop. More frenzied and impulsive, less self-control and emotional regulation, and you perform worse on cognitive control or impulse control tasks. There's a study that just came out recently from Microsoft that said the human attention span is now 8 seconds. A goldfish is 9 seconds. This is evolution going the wrong way. And it totally comes from the multitasking. Hewlett-Packard did a study of people who are addicted to their phones. You know, they're always waiting for that next text or phone call or email. And they found that people who were obsessed with them over a year lost 10 IQ points, more than if they started smoking marijuana. Now, they lost 9 IQ points if they started smoking marijuana, so I'm not a fan of that. But you want to be careful with multitasking. Fact number 7, creativity is a brain function. So creativity, or being creative, is seeing everyday things in a new and different way. Now, what's interesting is many creative people, obviously not all, but many of them, struggled with mental health issues such as having bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety disorders, alcoholism, or panic disorder. Creativity is higher when your prefrontal cortex, that most human thoughtful part of you, is lower, which is interesting. Creativity decreases if there's too much structure or too much conformity. Brain fact number 8, what you do today impacts tomorrow. So there are many things that hurt your brain. It's very important for you to know this list. And, you know, I've been doing this a long time. I've been able to boil down brain health to 3 things. Brain envy, you have to care about it. Avoid anything that hurts it, that's on this list of brain robbers. So brain envy, you have to care. Avoid anything that hurts it, and then do things that help it. So knowing this is absolutely essential. So what are some of the brain robbers? Alcohol. Alcohol is not a health food. Alcohol decreases activity and blood flow to the brain. Alcohol increases your risk for cancer. Alcohol decreases judgment. I'm just not a fan because of the level of problems I've seen with it. Drug abuse, methamphetamines, cocaine. The worst drug of abuse that I've seen is inhalants, inhaling organic solvents. So huffing, maybe you've known someone who would huff gasoline or paint thinner. Those are just disasters for the brain. Environmental toxins like water pollution, air pollution can harm the brain. Excessive caffeine. I'm completely not a fan of energy drinks, high caffeine, high sugar. Actually did a show with Dr. Oz and found that they just disrupt healthy brain function. Excessive computer or cell phone use is not good for brain function. Excessive texting, we talked about. TV. Kids who watch the most TV do the worst in school. So I would limit it. Video games as well, I would limit that. Fear, negative thinking. You're going to see in the program how negative thinking can negatively impact your brain. Head injuries, obvious. High stress, if you have too much stress, actually can hurt cells in the learning centers of your brain. being afraid, being negative. We have a whole class on ants, automatic negative thoughts, how to rid yourself of the ants, not challenging yourself. New learning is absolutely essential to brain development. A bad diet, which we'll talk about, poor mental exercise, lousy sleep. One of the worst things you can do, not hydrating. Hydration is absolutely important. Smoking's a nightmare for brain function because it constricts blood flow to the brain. Or never getting outside of your routine, doing things in a new and different way. So remember brain health. Brain envy, you got to care. Avoid any of the brain robbers, and then do things that help your brain. And we're going to spend a lot of this course on doing the right things for your brain. From diet, exercise, mental exercise, meditation, sleep, limiting screen time, intention. Your brain makes happen what it sees. And so developing clear goals can be so helpful to you. Gratitude, appreciation actually make your brain work better. Obviously, you should protect it. Appreciate the supervision because, adults in your life should be your frontal lobes until yours develop. Deep relaxation techniques, we'll talk about some of them. Positive thinking, accurate thinking, challenging yourself. We talked about with Mozart and Strauss, water, being at a healthy weight. There are a number of studies that say as your weight goes up, the size and function of your brain goes down. So really thinking. But being underweight is not helpful. We're going to talk about eating disorders coming up and then having healthy routines. And just the fastest way to be healthy is to find the healthiest person you can stand and spend time around him or her. So again, I'll show you a picture of someone who had a significant concussion and brain injury, drug abuse. This is someone who was dehydrated. And he was a bodybuilder. He purposefully dehydrated himself for a photo shoot. So he was taking a medicine called Lasix, and he was doing that so he would look buff and get rid of some of the water in his body so his muscles looked awesome, but you could see what it was doing to his brain. It was not good. When he was properly hydrated, his brain worked much better. And this is an interesting study I did with a patient. I had her focus on the things she loved about her life, what she was grateful for. That's the image on the left. And the image on the right is what she was afraid of in her life. And when she focused on fear, you can see her brain is shriveling. So if you go about halfway down on the right, that's her left temporal lobe is dropping in activity, one of the major learning, memory, and temper control areas of her brain. So when you're focused on your worries and fears, you're more likely to be irritable and you're more likely to have trouble learning. So what does all this mean? Your brain matters. You want to understand your brain and development. Your teachers and your parents' brains matter. Your understanding of this is critically important. And if you understand development, you will take much better care of your brain because you're not just taking care of it for now. What you're doing now is building a template, literally, for the rest of your life. So, knowing this information can help you with empathy, patience, and understanding for yourself and for those around you. You cannot change somebody else's brain, and they can't change your brains. But you can learn how you are harming your brain and changing it in a negative way, and you can learn how to change your brain and life in a positive way. Coming up, you're going to learn about specific brain systems, what they do, what happens when things go wrong. We're going to talk more about what hurts the brain and how to change your brain and your life. Stay with us.